alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah, alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Shaykh.
We're in business. Alhamdulillah.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I drop off at 7 o'clock sharp because that's when the last bus to my village leaves. So excuse me at that time.
That's fine. So much. So today we'll be covering the topic of doubts in Islam. And we mainly focusing on answering the questions that the audience has. So if I just introduce you, inshallah, and then we can begin. Okay, Abdal Hakim Murad had educated at the Cambridge University, Al-Azhar and London universities. He is the Shaykh Zayed Lecturer of Islamic Studies in the Faculty of Divinity at the University of Cambridge, and Doctor of Studies in the Theology of Old College, and also the Dean of Cambridge Muslim College. If I could ask you to just begin with talking about deep doubts and what your experience with doubts are within the Muslim community, especially in the modern context.
Of course, entirely familiar with phenomenon and the equal texts of Islamic doctrine, which are there in parts to show our faith through using instruments, burhan, formal strategies of argumentation and proof, that there's something about human beings that is naturally doubtful, perhaps because we are weak, suspicious, fearful creatures. Doubt is almost our nature, even though, of course, we crave certainty because we also crave security. So the ulama are perfectly aware of this phenomenon and have dealt with the issue of Shaykh or doubt really since the of Islam. And of course, the Quran itself is addressing a agnostic audience. It says, "Billahi shakkun fi samawati wal ard." Can there be doubt concerning Allah, the creator, the originator of the heaven and the earth, and describes the precious people whose faith is shaky, volatile, who are inclined towards following their own fantasies, who are preoccupied with questions of what now we call identity, the difficulties that they have with actually evident belief in Allah and Wahid al-Qahhar. Something that the ulama are perfectly aware of, and throughout the centuries the ulama have dealt with the issue. Imam Ghazali, Ibn Asqalani, Imam Sha'rani, really the great thinkers, the great consciences of the Ummah have all been aware of this sort of to diagnose it with a kind of issue of human frailty. Something the flesh is there, and you could say that many of the greatest works of the Islamic library, Imam Ghazali's Ihya al-Ulumuddin, probably the most popular one historically in the Ummah, have been calculated to overcome doubts. And we could say that Ghazali and Paradise, based in scandalous, Imam Ghazali, who became Islam, and Mujaddid is who's occupying more place in the classical Islamic manuscript libraries than the books of any other author. Went through not just one but two periods of doubt in arguments for the existence and knowledge of the Creator. And so I guess doubts about himself and his own intentions, which is another type of doubt that we might want to talk about this evening. And it was partly through those doubts that he became who he was, wonderful Islam al Ghazali. Sometimes doubts can be a useful way of making us think about what we believe, why we believe what we believe. They can force us to investigate proofs, and by Allah's grace, the result can be that we are at the end of the process, or often the painful process, stronger believers as a result. So we're all perfectly aware of this phenomenon. It's an aspect of human frailty. We have an exuberant, enormous issue which deals with it. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much. So if I ask you, what if we have a friend or a family member who's fallen into doubt, whether to to do with personal, something like personal trauma, some moral or social issues like sexual norms, or some scientific or philosophical concern like evolution or scientism or atheism, for example. How would we go about dealing with such a family member or a friend?
Well, every soul is different, and they say الطرق إلى الله بعدد أنفاس الخلائق. The roads to Allah, or the roads to Allah, are as many as the breaths drawn by beings. Different kinds of arguments will be necessary for different sorts of people. It's the classical doubt that arises from weakness of man, which is the consequence of people falling into bad behavior, falling into sinfulness. Secret vice will inevitably at our ikhlas and at our level of faith. Which is why the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle for us will guide them to our paths. Struggle for Allah, and we really try to get those prayers done sincerely and fast and do the other basic obligations to live for Allah and for others, and try to make sure that our private lives are as good as our public lives, and inshallah better. The chances of these doors, windows of opportunity for dark insinuations being opened are substantially diminished. And one of the best, although counterintuitive ways of returning to a yaqeen is simply by maintaining the outward forms. There is something profoundly wise and holistic and healing about the outward forms of the religion, and keeping away from the ugly practices which the ego is dragging us down into, but which the soul is only corrupted by. So the istiqamah, keeping on the straight and narrow, is the best way of enduring the doubts which generally irrational shadows cast upon the naturally light and believing human soul can find their points of access. So the first rule is make forms. They're there to protect you physically and biologically and spiritually and intellectually, and you must not allow any chinks in your armour, because there are dark, shadowy forces out there, occult principles, if you do wish to play games with people's fizzly belief. And if one allows a chink in one's armour, then sometimes those shadows can flood in. Sometimes also praying for people can genuinely help. It can provide kind of invisible suit around them that keeps them from entertaining these dark and irrational thoughts. So that is it's caused by weak faith, which is the result of falling into some vice or other. Even if one doesn't realise that it's a vice, it might be telling a lot of lies, it might be video or income tax return. All things tend to eat away at our integrity as human beings, and can open the door to this kind of suspicion. But of course, some people who, this is a minority, I think, who are genuinely concerned by intellectual, theological, philosophical issues, find themselves at a crux or a point in their theories where they have to arguments of Allah, and in many cases, particularly if they're not real experts, and they read books by some of the very aggressively atheists, for instance, they don't really know their theology. Sometimes they can be taken in by the debating tricks that people use, even though those people don't know the first thing about Islamic theology, and we've been dead, I think, within Islamic theology, but they're profoundly ignorant still. With ignorant Muslims who are perhaps schooled in some contemporary secular sciences, but whose practice of the religion is largely unreflective of traditional, something to be vulnerable as well. And that's, of course, the function of what we traditionally call ilm, the science of disputation, which deals precisely with shubuhat, with ambiguities, with insinuations, and whose really only utility is that. It's a polemical exercise, and where that science of Islamic theology is not cultivated amongst the Muslims, sometimes you will find that people become weak and confused because there seems to be nobody out there who can answer their questions. And so today's ulama, they sometimes might be quite poor, let alone their knowledge of political riches of the Islamic tradition. They simply are not capable of dealing with those that are flying around in books of popular science, for instance. So the fault is partly, I feel, with the ulama and with the institutions that claim ulama. This is finger of blame that I think we have to point at ourselves as an ummah. We haven't really equipped ourselves with the right weapons to deal with some of the intellectual battles of the modern age.
You mentioned we should be consulting the ulama to deal with these philosophical concerns, scientific concerns. But what would you say something regarding, like, for example, a personal trauma, a real hardship in life, for example, like family death or losing a job, and these traumas cause someone to doubt Allah in Allah's mercy, for example, or how would one go about dealing with these? Is it in a similar fashion?
Well, this is an important question. Sometimes people say it's sustained by the fact that they think that they're doing so well in life that there's a God that's helping them along. And that tends not to be a very good basis for faith, of course, even though we say shukr mun wajib, it's obligatory to thank the factor. Over invidious exercise of one-upmanship to say that just because I'm not the guy on the street corner who is saying the big issue and I'm doing just like that, therefore there must be a God. Allah Ta'ala is also the Lord of the fortunate, and sometimes particularly the Lord of the mustadafin and the people who are afflicted with misfortune. So it's not a very rational basis for faith. However, it's natural, it's human nature when we receive a hard knock and a loved one dies, and we get that dreaded cancer diagnosis, but also all of those calamities that are just part of dunya, to wonder what is going on. And Babaji has had a lot to say. He is quite strong in dealing with issues that are technically questions of theology, that is to say, divine justice. If God is merciful, then why do we see so much injustice and lack of mercy in the world? So that's a misunderstanding. And the reason for this is that we have a natural tendency to turn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into some kind of human or idol, as if somehow like us. Even though us, later kamithlihi shay, nothing resembles him or nothing resembles his life. The Holy says, whatever occurs to your mind, know that Allah is is something other than that. Sometimes we tend to have this rather theologically babyish Allah is some kind of cuddly Santa Claus figure in the sky who gives us a nice job and a nice car and a nice wife, and therefore we worship him. And that's not what our theology is. We don't anthropomorphize the divine. He is genuinely unlike ourselves. His knowledge is not our knowledge, because our knowledge is defined by the limits of our knowledge, which are massive. There's no limits to divine knowledge. The divine justice is not like human justice, because human justice is just imagine in the context of one who knows past, present, and future. And the divine will, similarly, is hard for us to analogize to the human will, even though we use the same word, irada, the human divine will. Still, Allah Ta'ala's will is not like our will, insofar as his will cannot be resisted. His will is pre-existent decree. So very often, as a kind of as the result of a kind of theology, the cut of the sky, we think, well, we see the cancer diagnosis, it's not going to be something like that, and that is an absurdity from the point of view of our theology. We just say, let's ask about what he does. His knowledge is total, knowledge is microscopic. So for us to say, well, we know what should have happened, or what preferred to happen, is just an expression of our ignorance. So tiny compared to the divine knowledge. The wisdom of the believer is just to say, now we hear, we obey. And to work on solid, which is more for Islam. The name of the religion itself, we just submit, we surrender to the way in which Allah has disposed the world, even if there's so much of it, 1.99% of it, which we don't understand. So we know that it is authored by the divine wisdom. So that we're humble, because we can't possibly, and also can guess the divine intentions in a given situation. Inshallah, we will find this ease and this acceptance of the divine decree. But human nature being what it is, it's easy, which is why we say we believe in God's decree. Following on it, the sweet and bitter of it.
previously, what about our own intentions? And perhaps you could also comment on the hadith of Abu Bakr and Hanzala, feeling that they were hypocrites actions.
Of the soundness of the belief. The belief is always about his intention, and this is why Imam al-Bukhari puts at the beginning of his Sahih al-Bukhari the hadith about intentions in the A'mal bin-Niyyat. There he read this amazing book after our last book that they've listed in the history of the US, Sahih al-Bukhari. He had this collection of hadith was going to be at the beginning. He hadith of intention to self really, that the book is only going to bring him spiritual rewards and benefits in the two worlds if he's in Islam. And that's the quantity of Islam. We're not legalists. It's as if the universe is like a kind of slot machine. You put in good works and you get treats out after you die. Basic reciprocity through the divine generosity, but essentially what counts, what makes our actions valuable, is what we mean by our actions, as well being the actions of our intentions. The believer who knows this is energized, in a sense, to be humble, that he's praying tahajjud every night, but he can't really be sure that any of that is accepted because everything depends on intention, which is very subtle, the very little thing to know. However, intentions, how often you can think about why we do things in a day? Well, maybe not even once a day. We tend to kind of really autopilot most of the time. This is the intention, and the wise insistence that we check our intentions and that we engage in this commandment has people also call yourselves to account. It's part of what might be called mindfulness, being attentive to what we do. And when we're attentive, very often we're aware of the ambiguity of our intentions in so many of the things that we do. And that's why, and generally, we find that we need to be sober about ourselves, but give others the benefit of the doubt. Because whatever we might see other people doing, we don't really know what their intentions might be, because that's buried in the depths of their hearts. So either has to give them the benefit of the doubt, and some kind of scrutiny of our own intentions, however dim that might be. And very often we find that our intentions are not particularly strong. Why the masjid? Why did I pray the extra 2 rakahs? Why did I do this extra thing? Well, was I really being crystal clear, or what a variety of intentions? The house, which is the center of everything that's religiously valid, means purification. Sort in Arabic is something you do to honey, for instance, when you filter it to get the pure honey out of the mess of the blacks. And the ulama say that is the one who has the smallest number of intentions behind each act and has millions of intentions. Although there's a good intention, but there's this proliferation why he's doing these things. So we need to have this inner scrutiny, this awareness. And of course, one of the greatness of Imam Ghazali, he came in some first of his doubts about himself, and it must have been a terrible trauma. The great privilege, dropped down having a kind of nervous breakdown while giving a lecture, not able to continue because he really was afraid that perhaps teaching to guide others, that he himself was in the grip of bad intentions and vainglory and kibr and pride, and he was going to help. And that's a sign, actually, of somebody who does have a living heart, who doubts his own intention, he was alive. The monarch doesn't doubt his own intention, he doesn't even doubt his internal life. He's on a kind of autopilot. He's only half alive, but the bit is the one who is truly alive and truly sensitive. The state of muraqabah, muhasabah, and that is why ulama often say that Allah, when he says he's calling us to what gives us life, it's talking about the eternal abode, the garden, which is al-hayawan, the life with a capital L in the akhirah. But it's also calling us to a fuller and richer and more attentive life in this world. The gift of hudur, attentiveness, which is something that many of us let go of. So we go through our lives in a kind of fog. Maybe we live to be 80, 90, who knows. But most of those years, because they don't have the religious, spiritual, inward discipline, are kind of in a kind of vague, dreaming state, hardly at all. But even if his life is not so long, because paying attention so much of the time, because of his need to scrutinize himself and check it out and check his intention, has a much richer and a more profound life. This is one of the gifts of faith.
Okay, so I like to invite everyone to ask questions on the chat box. In the meanwhile, Shaykh, could you also perhaps comment on, I think you have already previously mentioned a little bit, but like if some issues, for example, with some Islamic laws, for example, sexual norms, or perhaps the hudud punishment, or Islam on social values, how someone go about tackling this?
Well, we have to be aware that we are breathing the air of a civilization that, by all historical standards, is extremely strange. With other cognates and other civilizations in the past, and then it put the Hindu world, they dealt with the Chinese world and the African world. Those worlds were still focused on ideas of the hereafter, ideas of the intrinsic nature of values, the inherent nobility and purpose of human life. Now a civilization which doesn't really have a point as such. Where, a bit like ancient Rome, I suppose, to perpetuate itself and maximize sort of hedonistic utility and opportunities for its individual members. It doesn't have a higher purpose. And sometimes the logic of that world, which is that the only good thing is encourage people to have as good a time as possible and to do what they feel like doing, something influences us. But we know, as fitly human beings, that what makes us happy is not simply doing whatever we feel like doing. What makes us happy is restraining ourselves according to a noble image of what a human being is. In other words, we turn from a discourse of rights and to a discourse of duties. We're not interested so much in our own lives, we're interested in doing our duty to other people and to animals and to the natural world, the environment, to all of our creation, which is a very counterintuitive and strange attitude for the moderns. So when we look at the extreme individualism of the modern world, the consequences of the breakdown of family values, people never seem to see their cousins anymore, old people are more or less abandoned in old people's homes, the increase in mental illnesses, anxiety, depression, self-abuse of various kinds, cutting and rates, all of these malfunctions in the species are the result of an individualism that is not human beings crave. Instead, therefore, is forms of regulation and emulation of people who are desperately saints. So for us, the ideal is not choose everything you feel like, choose your sexuality, choose your gender, choose your race, choose whatever. Instead, what we're interested in is complying to values of sanctity. And Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what we're interested in. We'd rather be like somebody amazing, like him, who changed the world, then to demonstrate to the world how cool we are because we've just invented a form of sexuality for ourselves. It's actually more noble and ultimately brings about greater human fulfillment and satisfaction and happiness to conform to an image of sanctity and beauty and excellence rather than just to follow what you feel like doing. That's a hard lesson for people nowadays until sometimes they've drunk the cup of individualism to the dregs and realize that it leads them to permanent agitation. And sometimes those people make the best converts, which one sees quite regularly. Some of the people come out of the furthest point of the modern process very often become people who are grateful for someone when they discover it.
Okay, question from someone. They're asking, what are the common questions that you typically pose regarding Islam? I think it would be in this context.
Okay, an example of such a question.
I'm sure if the listener would ask a specific one, but I think she's asking in general terms of like things that are causing issues in our current context.
What is causing issues? I think that in my experience, that which is disturbing Muslims most is not so much new liberal social doctrines which are changing all the time and becoming one or some of traditional people of faith, but rather the global situation and the growth of aberrant forms of extremism that hurt people more. The outside threat, because there seem to be deep aberrations and sicknesses within the Ummah itself. But in my experience, that's really what hurts them and smacks them and causes doubt. The fact that almost every day you seem to be bringing us news of people who say that follow religion perfectly, that bring the most basic rules of civic behaviour for civilians in the street because they're angry about some political issue overseas, and this does sting Muslims, I think. And if that's repeated every day for years, then that will have an effect. That will have an effect on people's faith, on their inner well-being, because the honour of the believer is religion. Religion is dishonour, then he himself is dishonoured, and that's a very hard thing to carry, because honour is the most fundamental of the rights that God has given human beings. So this dishonoring by the extremists, I think, is probably the thing that causes most disquiet amongst young Muslims nowadays, because it just seems to occur every day that some new dishonorable and horrible thing attributed to the religion of Islam by the world media, and after a while, there are kind of that does diminish people's sense of belongingness to the Ummah and to the religion. It's in turn extremely subversive.
Okay, Shaykh. So could you? I think you've mentioned some of these things already, but if you could provide I would say, general methodology, perhaps, of dealing with doubts, or anything you want to make in this regard.
It's a good question. It's most of the time when people come to me with misunderstanding that I might be able to help them in some way, on themselves, and they say, I don't understand, the local multi-star doesn't understand, and I don't know who to talk to about. The issues are startlingly superficial and sometimes even rational. And often what people really want is somebody to listen to them, and to take them seriously, and to give them respect. People, especially in the ethnic minorities in the modern West, are not much respect. So parents, people in the schools, universities, the mass media, the politicians, it's very hard for a normal human being to have that, to feel he respects them or their values. And some people can deal with it, some people find it unbearable and can laugh. It's one reason why people can involve themselves in drugs or criminality or other malfunctions. In my experience, what they really need is just somebody to listen to them and to engage with them as human beings. This is with extremists, for instance. The arguments that one hears are apparently silly, beside the magnificence of classical astronomy or Solon, but that anybody could seriously be attracted to that. But they grow in the grip of some one outrageous humiliation, and they just lash out at the outside world under religious rhetoric that they think actually makes that lashing out moral. But what you need to do is people spend a lot of time with them and to hear them and to get through to the humanity beneath. And why they soul and the natural Muslim fitra, which is kind of repelled by aberrant violence and cruelty and the anger and bitterness of it all, eventually takes over. But it does time, and there's no shortcut, there's no site that one can direct people do like your doubts. Now, maybe specialized people I deal with, for instance, people who are freaked out by the Islamic implications of streaming to the 13th dimension. You can find formal arguments like that. 9 times out of 10, what people really need is some kind of personal engagement, some kind of spiritual growth that will sort them out again. Most of the apparently severe aberrations in our community actually have quite superficial causes and can be resolved with just a little bit of TLC. Yeah.
Wait for more questions, Shaykh. Is there anything else you'd like to comment on this subject?
I think sometimes people's of anxiety and stress and abandonment in a world that seems to be out of control and that has no way of respecting them can be exacerbated, made worse by experience that one's faith is shaky. And in that context, I think to be more compassionate with people. Faith is harder in many ways than it used to be. In some ways it's easier because we have more scientific insight into the amazing order of the universe. The labels, you couldn't really see the incredible geometries and physical constants behind the physical world. Now we see just how extraordinary it is. The miracle of consciousness becomes more and more extraordinary. But it's the case that the air we breathe nowadays is a secular air, greedy, consumerist, worked by banks and big entertainment corporations that often make money out of activating our lowest possibilities. And people feel that they're strangers in this age, all of that. And as a result, that can lead to a certain sense of gratitude and abandonment. What to do is to find the right companionship. That's another epidemic of modernity. Government statistics indicate that 1.1 million people in Britain now suffer acute loneliness, which is recognised by the NHS as a serious health issue. Acute loneliness is the equivalent in health terms of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And the NHS is concerned by that. It's not so much the case in Muslim communities where the family structure still can be quite strong, but there are people out there who are suffering ongoing being abandoned in bad relationships. And the community needs to get its act together and know that the masajid in particular are places of fellowship and forgiveness, not judgmental. Anybody can go along and experience that healing of praying with other people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's something that the community really needs to sort out. So the spiritual sicknesses that are parts of the atomism and the shattered social and neighbourhood fabric of the world. That sometimes Muslims are also Muslim countries now. Even I think Saudi Arabia has its first old people's home, which is some kind of horrible aberration in a Muslim society. But the structures are starting to unravel. So you may have a situation akin to that in Western countries in a few generations. But when she was in her old people home, it actually closed. Because they basically went out of business. And they found that there were some people, old people, been for years, there for years, and they couldn't have families at all, or the families were just not interested. There was a lawyer who was paying their fees, and that was it. That is the norm in the modern world. And when people are really lonely, they are sick, they experience doubts, they have a sense of abandonment, they feel angry, they feel despairing. But there are so many other contemporary sicknesses. Has to do also with body image. I think some modern Muslims, particularly, are hypnotized by the modern cult of how you look, what is the latest look, is fashionable hijab, and a certain occupation with a body image that is actually extremely oppressive. Clearly, one of the hijab is that it liberates you from all of that, and you can start thinking and doing more things rather than just how you look. Parts of because of the obsession with a particular body image in mass media, and the magazines and the actresses, a lot of Muslim women in particular feel uncomfortable about sense of health, and so they go down the route. So many are exploiting financially of going to cosmetic surgeons, of modifying themselves in various often expensive and sometimes metabolically quite damaging ways, and that too can lead to anxiety, depression, and that's all quite unnecessary. The way Allah has made you, and recognise that the outside world, with its Hollywood standards, is extremely unnatural, and those actors are probably airbrushed and so anyway, then you should be able to relax a bit and just be happy with the way Allah has made you. And if you're happy in that, then it's much less likely that the imps and hobgoblins of doubt will start to creep inside you and recover with your iman.
Can you comment on some people having about the authenticity of the literature in general and the role of the prophet and the movement of Quran only? What would be your comments on this?
What issues here are the Quran only people, and they're very not numerous really in the Ummah, with more liberations to deal with. Generally seem to be motivated by the sense that Holy Prophet is not a fully inspired individual, and therefore we shouldn't be accepting his way as authoritative. The saints and scholars of the Ummah down the ages is a kind of aberrant and strange misunderstanding. The Ayab or any great accounts of the Prophet Imam Suhaili, for instance, or one of any of the beautiful descriptions of the Holy Prophet, you see that this is a gigantic, fantastic individual, and I go through Texas here with my mainly non-Muslim students at the university, and they are very moved, taken aback, in awe of the sheer personality of the Holy Prophet. And this has been a constant in serious Western literature since the time of Goethe and Carlyle and others. Clearly, Allah a great character. So to think that that is not somehow something we should be copying and trying to find out about, emulate, they have just misunderstood. They haven't read God Ayat or sorry, they just proclaim ignorance. The question of and of course the Quran does not supply you with enough information to have an operative religion. It doesn't tell you how to pray. They really explain how to do the details of the Hajj. If you have the Quran, you can't really do your 5 pillars, you can't do most of your mu'amalat. You've got a kind of fragmentary Islam. So in effect, by saying Quran only, they're saying nothing. You are left with nothing. The question of the Hadith, of course, is hugely complicated, hugely technical. Jonathan Brown and Neil Robinson and others have looked at it. And it is complex. But by and large, for instance, we have here the local office of the Sunnah Project, which is run by the Soros Islamicist Foundation, which has inputted in a critical way the great Hadith collections. We just finished with Mufti Ahmed bin Hanbal, the first great critical edition is now, and the Sunan al-Bayhaqi is next. It's to try to cast doubt on the Hadith literature. We're simply not working with the kind of technical abilities which we have now, and we're also not familiar with the capacity of pre-modern human beings for gigantic feats of memorization. So they were just skeptical that people long ago couldn't possibly have been that sort of integrity and couldn't possibly have had those capacious memories. But I've seen myself with the Hadith scholars who I've had the privilege of studying with. True, because I've seen it myself, that they don't need to open books because they've memorized hundreds of thousands of hadiths with the isnads, and is more accurate than one of which is Shaykh Muhammad ibn al-Fadani. I studied with in Mecca. With his students, mostly Syrians around him, and were reading back Sahih Muslim to him. The Shaykh book. But we came to a misprint, the Shaykh would tell us to correct the misprint. It was in his memory. And to see that, they engaged with the reality of Muslim Hadith scholarship, and as a result, they've really misunderstood and misused the amazing world of Bukhari, Tirmidhi, and so forth. There's a certain cynicism, skepticism, and inhabiting of an Enlightenment, usually German, academic space in which one just looked things up and had what's groaning wisdoms. The ulama didn't do that because they had it with their heads to do with cultural ignorance. And anybody who really looks into the science of hadith can see what an extraordinary marvel of systematic literary examination and filtration it was. Of course, there's disputes amongst the ulama as to the authority of the hadith, which constitutes the bulk of the hadith, and that's also is really about how used for varying degrees. But the overwhelming view of the ulama have looked into this and used the latest technologies. But of course, of the early ummah, those people who were intoxicated with love and faithfulness to the founder, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that was a world in which people really did know the material much better than we do, and they served it. And we're grateful for their achievement rather than a huge historical distance trying to unpick it.
Thank you, Shaykh. Someone asked, what advice would you give to a family or person who has faced a period of weakness of faith due to trauma caused by mental health episodes, in particular depression and psychosis?
Well, again, these things can be caused by different things. Sometimes it's caused by abuse, sometimes it's caused by extreme trauma, people escaping from war zones, for instance. Sometimes it has some kind of neurological origin. It can be dietary, it can have many causes. And in some cases, it's simply a matter that's best left to a clinician because then it will provide the kind of upbeat mental equilibrium that should enable people to think like human beings normally do in a cheerful and optimistic way, which is the natural seedbed of faith. In some cases, it can be overcome through company, through patience, through compassion from spouses. Some cases, however, are genuinely difficult. And in those cases, all we can do and to the afflicted person is to remind them of Allah's mercy and justice. If they inherited some condition, or if they're traffic accident, they're not the way they used to be, then inevitably it's the case that Allah's mercy will prevail and they will be judged according to Allah's mercy and they're not fully repentant. But we have days for those people, even though sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes that can be a family's route to pass, dealing with a really difficult, troubled individual throughout their lives. If the family genuinely is nurturing and makes sacrifice for that person, then Allah will open for them the gates of salvation. So yeah, it depends very much on the individual. There's no single magic bullet for all mental conditions.
Thank you, Shaykh. It's okay to ask any kind of theological question.
In principle, of course, because the classic theology, the Kalam of medieval Islam, always entertained every possibility because they were inhabiting an interesting cosmopolitan world, but Central Asia, considerable religions there, every Muslim sect, people of agnostic or materialistic persuasions were there. We're aware of basically Hinduism and Buddhism. So yeah, Islamic theology emerged in a world of maximal contestation, what we call jadal, nazar, which is to use reason in order to compare and to assess contrasting views. So if people are being eaten by a maggot of doubt to the theological nature, then obviously it's their obligation to move the ulama and see if they can answer them.
Okay, about the preservation of the Quran and its authenticity. Comments on that?
Well, the consensus of Western non-Muslim scholars is that the Mus'haf that we have seems to be an original transmitted text from the earliest time of Islam. And so that are multiple. Firstly, that we do not have evidence for significant variance on the basis of the regional version of early Islam. In other words, the early Quranic fragments and manuscripts preserved, say, from North Africa, don't represent a different tradition from those which we have from Central Asia, for instance. It means that the text must have reached something like its final version before the quests, which is really early, which means time of the Khulafa. So that's the reason why the consensus of modern scholarship that we don't care with is that the Quran is an authentic document of final Islam. But we have the ability through radiocarbon dating to look at some of the fragments of Musahif. That obviously done a couple of years ago in Birmingham, the manuscripts that they found there. We've done shortly before that with a manuscript which exists in the University Library Tübingen in Germany. If you look at the University of Tübingen, you can see the manuscript, you can see it in English, and the scholars, I think Muslims, determined that the overwhelming probability is that this is from the period of the Sirah itself. So that argument really has been one. Allah preserved his book by the onslaughts of various assaulted, militant Christian evangelicals and others who tried to pick away at it. But it has preserved it, and alhamdulillah, the consensus of civil Western scholarship is that it is an integral document from the earliest period of Islamic history.
Thank you, Shaykh. Concluding remarks on this topic.
Inshallah. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is muqallib al-qulub. He's the one who turns the hearts. That is the locus, the habitat of faith. The heart, however, is the most ambiguous and difficult of the aspects of the human creature to think about, conceptualize. So the most important thing of us, which is our value system, our peers, is that part of us that is hardest to understand and to locate, and you can never show scientifically. Consciousness is a very mysterious thing. And this heart, this qalb, is something more subtle than what Ghazali calls a lahmas sinawbari, which is a pine-shaped piece of meat. So it's a latifa, ruhaniya, it's a subtle spiritual thing. It's something that is, as the hadith says, fingers of the compassionate. He does it as he wills, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the bestower of faith. He calls guide, he calls rather soberingly and more clean, the one who calls misguidance, is by his leader, by his life, which is that even though and on the kind of human user interface level, the world of cause and effect, and humanly experience time as being real, and we as though we were somehow in charge of our outward and inward lives. The reality is, later laka min al-amri shay', as the hadith is told, you have nothing of the matter. Everything is in the hands of the Creator. And this is a deeper level, not the user face, the rules by which we engage with each other on a day-to-day basis, but the deep logic of the system, the divine power, and the divine wisdom, and the divine, because of the hadith, it's that the heart of the believer is between two fingers of Ar-Rahman. Al-Rahman is not Al-Jabbar and Muntaqim Al-Qahar that fills our heart, it's the Rahman. And that is why we always كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حب الفأل, use optimism. And even if people seem to have died or lived terrible life, you know what the heart of that is, the number of that person, what our last moment will. So even if we pass through periods of affliction and doubt and uncertainty and confusion, even if we come and go like a tide and we get really when the dark flood will hit us next, We should have the confidence in Allah's mercy, and that if we have to do what's right, then inshallah we will be brought to Him without fitna and in a state of iman, inshallah, because He wishes us to go to paradise, nature to call us to Dar-as-Salam. He's not out to get us. He's not trying to trip us up. He is a merciful God, and He said that it's His rahmah that is what can pass. So we have that, the foundation of our awareness. As we move through this world, the strange, confusing, odd landscape of cause, effect, and time, and up and down, and colours, and virtues, and strangeness of the world, as we do that and experience inner hurts, and doubts, and confusions, that's just the pilgrimage that all human beings have to go through. But we have this ultimate confidence that it is through the Rahman, and that He has created all of this, and so through His mercy, and that He will bring us back to Him, inshallah, through His mercy as well, because He's Arhamar Rahim, most merciful, and we should feel anxious or depressed or distressed, because in the eyes of eternity, our tears here on earth is only a tiny, an infinitesimal fraction of the totality. It's the abode of the afterlife, which is the true life, and that's where our aspirations and expectations should be focused, inshallah.
Thank you for joining us, Shaykh. I hope
everybody is watching, inshallah. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Rahmatullah.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.